Evening. I'm Jeremy. Sorry. Hey guys, I'm Jeremy. Co-founded Clyde Capital with Bob. So been out the last couple of weeks and do a baby, but wanted to do tonight's deal debrief of the Government House Apartments. So kind of the plan is we'll go through a little bit of the timeline, some of the goods, the bads, the others, probably in 30 minutes or so. Take a little bit of questions if there are any, and to wrap it up. Really, the idea here is a couple of things. One is we want to be able to just answer questions as people have them, see how kind of we do our thing. And then two, we're going to record this and save it. So in the future, if people want to kind of go back and find more information on us, we're trying to be as transparent as possible with a good, bad, or other. So let me stop share here. And let's show you screen. There we go. All right, so this is Government House Apartments. And so I want to show a little picture here. So Government House Apartments is in Mobile, Alabama. And for reference, Mobile, Alabama, right here. Pensacola, Florida, it's about an hour away where we're based out of. So 1412 Government Street was the address. This is the Midtown area of Mobile. Just for some reference, kind of generally what the picture of the property looks like. We're driving down the Google Drive here. This is the red brick property right here. It's a 1942 build, 3 building, originally 12, now 13 unit apartment complex. So that is kind of what we're going to cover tonight, and ups and downs and all of the rest. So let me kind of start with kind of what we found here. So this is a deal that came to us from a broker relationship. And so the broker that we used on this had already sold us one other deal about 4 or 5 months before. He was currently at the time also a property manager on the other deal. And he called up Bob and he said, I have a deal for you. You need to put an LOI on it right away. It's going to get snapped up. And so that's exactly what we did. We went and put an LOI on it without seeing the deal at all and said, hey, we'll figure it out later, right? So kind of one of Clyde Capital's kind of focused and even really core value thoughts is let's just make progress, right? We'll make progress right now. We'll deal with the results later. But if you don't start going right now, you may miss the deal, right? So that's what happened here. So we bought this deal from a local broker in town who had bought the deal not that much farther before us with the intention of doing exactly what we were planning to do, which is the renovation and then releasing of the entire property. In fact, he'd actually kicked out all of the tenants. And so it was basically an empty building except for the 2 units that we did not own when we took possession. However, their partner on the deal, they were going to do the renovation with, decided to back out and go do something else. And so they put it right back up for sale a few months later. And that's how we ended up kind of jumping on it. Really only 4 or 5 months after they had bought it. It was 11 units of a 13-unit condominium association. So you saw those 3 buildings. There were 4 units in each building. And then they decided during the condominium association creation to split one of the 2-bedroom units into a studio and a loft. And so that's how we got to 13. We owned the 11, not to include the loft that had been split out, and one of the other 2 bedrooms that had been sold to somebody else about 10 years prior. The plan here was, right, because of the area, we needed to do a pretty significant renovation to kind of clean up and bring up the class of the property. 1942 build, so a little bit older. We originally were throwing around the idea of adding a second bathroom. What we found in some of these old buildings, though, is the plumbing, even in the ground underneath the slab, just wasn't going to support it anywhere that would be financially feasible. And so we put together a pretty small plan to buy this with a couple of the partners. And we learned some things, right? So this was not our first deal. So one of the things we learned is we needed a general contractor to kind of help GC the project, to manage the project. And so we went out and we found a guy that wanted to GC it. So a young guy here out of Pensacola, put together a plan. He was really excited about the idea. We were excited about somebody having a little bit more contracting experience. He wasn't a GC. He ran a construction company doing garage doors. Decided he would take it on. So we thought that was going to work out great. Put a budget together. We were happy with that. Kind of went off to go there. Structure-wise, right, we only had about 6 investors in this deal. And then one of the investors actually brought debt while the others were bringing equity. So $250,000 raised. We brought $80,000 from debt and $170,000 from equity. And the nice part about the debt, right, is fixed rate, trying to pay it off within that first year. It ended up taking us 2, which was part of the extension process on the debt. But that allowed a significantly higher return because we were able to leverage just a little bit more. That was all, good with the bank. So we were buying this property initially for $357,000. So Bob, I think he put on his post when it was bought for $240,000, but that was actually the bank loan. The purchase price was $357,000, and our original plan was to spend about $230,000 to renovate, get it back up to snuff, get it back on the market. And we'd had an appraisal in hand that said if we did that, it should be worth $720,000 to $780,000. And as is, the day we bought it, the appraisal was for $440,000. So we thought we were definitely kind of in the green kind of day one. Just needed to do the work. So our intention was to buy this deal beginning of 2017. I think put it under contract in January. Our closing date was set for March 3rd. We get to the end of February and the bank is not able to close, right? So their processes hadn't ran all the way through. I think it was only our second time working with the bank. And at the end of the day, they kind of dropped the ball. So it should have been a 60-day close, ended up having to get pushed. And so the seller was not willing to push closing date. So we actually ended up having to close with the seller. So we brought all of the funds from our investors, and then they gave us a $100,000 loan to just keep the thing closed in March. And then we'd refinance with the bank a month later when they were ready to go. The downside of doing that, right, is you have extra closing costs, which were real. But the bigger problem is we had set all of our construction processes and plans on a calendar. So we were planning to do the roof first, right? Roof down. We had all these people lined up. And then because we weren't able to close on time with the bank, there were no funds to get started to start the construction process. So we started kind of behind the 8 ball almost immediately. That wasn't great. It kind of snowballed a little bit, which we'll talk about a little bit here forward. But 6 investors, right? A little partnership. And we're off to the races. So originally closed in March of 2017 and then reclosed with the bank a month later on April 10th. We had a $450,000 loan from the bank, which would give us about $250,000 to do the renovations. We were ready to go get started. The first thing about this deal that was weird, and it took us a little bit of time to get our hands around, was the condo association. So this is a property that had been an apartment complex since the 1940s. Somebody in the height of the go-go mid-2000s had decided to make this a condominium association. The story that we got was that the couple that had done that had gotten divorced during the process. The wife had gotten the property and she didn't really know what to do. So she at some point just got disinterested in it and kind of left it after creating the condo documents, selling 2 units, and just kind of walked away from completing the project. It kind of floundered as a unrenovated apartment right up until the point that the previous owners had bought it. So that's what we walked into. And we decided to kind of jump right into the repairs. So some things to talk about, right? This was a deal that had 5 property managers in less than 5 years. So one of the things that I think I get questioned a lot when people ask me about buying multifamily is, what am I looking out for? My number one thing I always say is who's going to manage them, right? At the end of the day, these things don't manage themselves. I think a lot of times we go to events or read books or we watch YouTubes. We think, hey, if I can just get the deal closed, the thing just makes money, right? That is definitely not the case. And we'll talk more about that kind of as we move forward. But we started with a property manager day one that was managing another deal for us. So you'll see over and over again, one of the issues that I think we have had in the past is that we have been trying to consolidate property management to less people. And in doing, unfortunately, sometimes we have gotten substandard kind of management at different properties that they don't fit. And that definitely happened here. So we started the property management company that was working on another deal. That deal started falling apart from the management company perspective. They just couldn't get the right employees. So we had to kind of cut them from both. So we went to our second management company really within just the first couple of months. I think we bought in April. So by August, we'd already made a change to a new property management company. But by the way, it was also taking on another deal in North Mobile. So same thing. That management company lasted all the way from August of 17 until April of 2018. And then we had to let them go. They just weren't answering the phones. Like tenants were coming like, hey, I would like to rent a unit. And nobody was answering, right? And so we moved to a local guy that had been working with us, and he managed, basically self-managed, right? So Kevin came in. Kevin did a great job. He took over in April of 18, and then we made the change to go back to a management company in April of 19. But in that year, 18 to 19, he did probably the best job of anybody of actually keeping the thing full, making money, answering questions, being really able to kind of solve the problems as they popped up. and the thing is, he lived in Pensacola. He lived an hour away. He still was more receptive than the people who live in town. So he was planning to move up with his wife. We were trying to make some changes, so we made it split in 2019. So we were on our third manager by the second year. Then we moved to a property manager that we were using on, again, another deal back in April of 2019. And they had it for kind of the crux of the property. And then we finally had to let them go in November last year. We took back over ourselves, and then we continued with the sale after we at Klein Capital and our Alpha Property Management took over. Let's see here. So let's talk first about the delay in closing. So the delay in closing cost us all the time for construction. So originally we had roofs planned to be put on within the first couple of weeks. Because we had a slide, that ended up getting pushed weeks and months back. Right? So everything was slotted. Then once the slots fell out from their spot, kind of the entire card house just fell apart. And so that wasn't great. The GC was working in Pensacola, right, ran his own business, and was trying to get out to Mobile to kind of see this. And the short answer was just a great guy, great investor, but just the wrong fit for the job that we had at that time. So unfortunately, we had to make a change. And so by November of 2017, we had to move on from him as the contractor, move to a new contractor to keep things going. We created a construction agreement with him. And so we said, hey, your ownership in this deal is going to be dependent on your ability to operate the construction. So we had to make that determination there in November. Hey, can't keep you, right? This isn't working. He knew that too. It was a mutual decision. So we had to cut back some of his ownership that he was going to get from equity because he wasn't going to be able to finish the construction. So again, we knew we needed somebody to GC it. We found the GC, but the GC just wasn't the right guy. So that wasn't super awesome. I had my second child in October of 2017. About 5 weeks later, he got very sick. Had to go to the hospital. Was in intensive care for about 2 weeks on a ventilator. While I'm sitting there, waiting for the doctor to come in, get a phone call that we've had a massive flood at this property. So Government House in October of 2017, we had already started working on the two other buildings. We had not started on the third building, but in the third building where we had started work, a water heater blew up in the attic. It completely just flooded the entirety of the third building. And so there was definitely some divine intervention there. That was a property we hadn't touched already. And so because of that, we were able to get a huge insurance check to put it back together. But since we hadn't already done any work in there, we didn't ruin anything. That money actually kind of really helped us buoy after we started spending a little bit too much with that first GC. The 2018, right? So that's November 17. 2018 comes around. We finish up most of the construction process, but we realized that our original $250,000 budget wasn't even close. We had spent probably 75% of the budget with the very first GC, got probably 30% of the work done. Kind of just not being able to keep up with the budget that originally planned was definitely a problem. So in 2018, we had to catch up on that stuff as much as possible. And we were still working on the condo association, right? So I had met with the other two owners in the condo association. And one of them was a nice guy out of New Orleans. He came, drove over for it, had lived in the property after Hurricane Katrina because he needed a place to live. Had since moved back to New Orleans. He didn't really care, right? He had a renter in there. He was paying not nearly enough. He was ready to get rid of the property, just didn't know how or if he was ever going to do it. He was very open to either selling us the unit or doing whatever he could to make the property better, get his money back out. The other owner was not. Probably the hardest to work with individual I've ever met in my entire life. Mid-60s, maybe 70s-year-old guy, had bought the property, his property, for $125,000 in 2006. They promised the world from the previous condo association operator, right, the person that owned the building, had never gotten anything that he was promised, and he was basically out to get anybody that he could, right, to get his. And so what started as a very cordial meeting, like, hey, we're getting ready to go on to work here. We'd like to kind of work with you guys. He just became belligerent pretty quickly and just started shouting, right? So I actually never ended up having a phone call with him, did not end up in shouting, with him shouting at me for the next 3 years. So that was awesome. So what we learned pretty quickly was that the condominium association was a lot harder than we really thought because it had never been properly operated. Starting something from scratch was going to be tough. So I actually went back to the original attorney who wrote the documents, spent some money to go get a consultation and say, hey, make sure this, what am I missing here? Hey, you're fine, right? So he gave me all the things to do. We were going back and forth on whether we should play hardball with the guy. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't worth the effort. So finally decided to kind of just sideline him. We went ahead and did all the work. Could have charged him hefty fees for that. But we knew financial condition, he had really no way to pay, and he was just belligerent. So we decided to kind of just take one and just keep moving to make sure that we can keep the deal moving. But in 2018, we finished almost all of the units. I think we had one more to do. And the owner of the 12th unit wanted to sell. So we went ahead and refinanced the property. Now that we had a significantly higher value, I was able to buy the 12th unit and then get a little bit of cash to finish off the last one so that we could have 12 completed units that we could keep back on the market. During this time, we hadn't been able to pay any of our cash flow, right? So we'll go in a second. I'll show you the original kind of deal plan. We had thought that the first year was going to be no cash flow, and the cash flow would start in year 2. But because of the construction problems, spending more money than we thought, there's just no cash flow. So in 2018, we did our 2019, we actually did the refinance. We were able to give a little bit of the original capital back to investors, but we were kind of just stuck. We made that property management change to the local property management company after Kevin stepped away, and things didn't go well. Right? So we learned a valuable lesson in that you can't expect a property manager to be good at everything, right? And so we had a lady who was really good at Class C apartments, right? And she managed her Class C apartments like a pit bull mom. She'd beat these people up. She'd yell at them and then give them a hug. She would qualify anybody that called before she wasted their time. But she then started treating these Class B plus, kind of A- tenants the same way she was treating the Class C. And let me tell you, that does not work, right? So instead of trying to sell the unit when somebody called, she would start to kind of qualify them with the unit when they called. Needless to say, that's not a winning combination when you're trying to attract a higher clientele and charge a higher rate. So we realized that we were having problems here. I continued asking the property management company to provide some help to her. They were a little bit slow to do anything. And that kind of became the beginning of the end for us. Specifically, one of the things that it ended up doing was we ended up moving to radio ads. So we were having a terrible time finishing up renting out the last 2 units. And so we moved to radio ads. Surprisingly, radio ads is what got us our last couple of really good tenants. The other thing we did during that time is we had moved 2 of the units to be Airbnbs. So when you think about a revenue number, right, Airbnbs were making about 1.5 to 2 times the same rent as a comparable unit. Our total cost all in on Airbnb with all the furnishings and stuff was only a couple $1,000s. We were able to do it very efficiently. I'll show you some pictures of those in a second. In general feel of the property. That was really kind of what buoyed a lot of cash for us. And the only issue that we had, Airbnb, this is 2017, 2018, 2019. Airbnb wasn't super hot like it is today. So initially it was kind of a niche thing. And so we would get some pretty techno savvy kind of people understanding what Airbnb is. And they'd stay for a pretty long time. So we had one guy, I remember one time stayed for 4 or 5 months. He was working on a ship. His ship was in the shipyard getting worked on and kept getting extended the amount of work. So he just kept staying, right? He was paying like $3,000 a month for what otherwise would be a $950 a month rent. So great for us and worked for him because he didn't have to live in a hotel. What we found though, is that as more and more people found about Airbnb, especially as we moved into 2020, is we got a different clientele. That clientele wanted to party and they wanted to only stay for a couple nights. They wanted to be from the local area and they really they tore stuff up, right? So we had one experience with a group that had come in through Airbnb. They were actually from Europe. They asked if they could stay past their Airbnb stay. Our manager, unfortunately, had made the decision to go ahead and do that outside of the Airbnb, and they tore up the unit, right? They left weed all over the spot. They broke some things. They got marks up all over the walls. We were going to be out a whole bunch of money. However, we did threaten that we would take them back to Airbnb and they'd lose their opportunity to get back on the app. Not sure if that would actually happen or not since it was outside of the Airbnb booking, but they actually decided to pay up, right? So they paid a couple $1,000s for us to clean up their problem. And so we learned that, depending on the type of people there, it can be pretty good. What we ended up doing was getting rid of one of the Airbnbs because it wasn't worth it. We just had too many problems. But what we learned over time was the real answer wasn't getting rid of it. It was just extending the minimum stay. So what we found is for units like this, nicer 2-bedroom, 1-bath units in a good part of town, you're looking for people that want to be there for a couple of weeks at a time minimum. So we did 4 to 5 night minimum stays, and all of a sudden, all of our problems, people trying to come in for the weekend and partying, smoking weed, causing problems for the other tenants, basically went away. So there's your ninja tip for Airbnb and kind of nicer houses. By this point, though, right? So we're in 2020. We had a hard time filling it up. We hadn't really paid anything on our cash flow, because we've just been holding everything back to make sure that we could keep the thing afloat. Construction had all been paid off. We decided that we needed to go ahead and make a change and put this thing up for sale. So we started prepping, getting everything set, making sure our financials were in a good spot in middle of 2020, and went all the way through 2021, early 2021, and then put it on the market. We listed it with the same broker that we bought it with at his new company. Fortunately, a couple weeks in, they made a change, and he was no longer working there, so kept with them. We had a ton of interest in selling this property. So we knew originally that the expectation was like a $720,000 in upon stabilization. We'd already refinanced about the $850 mark before we ever finished the renovations. And we decided to go ahead and try to throw this thing out for $1.25 million, which would be over $100,000 per unit. And we had quite a bit of interest. So lots of LOIs, lots of pretty strong LOIs. Our first set of LOIs, I believe, was in April of 2021. We actually had a military connection with us, some guys we already knew and had to deal with. They were working with a group that was going to turn the entire property into an Airbnb for the entire property. But when they started doing their due diligence, realized they would need a sprinkler system. So they dumped it. And it just was going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to put in sprinklers, so they couldn't do it. So we moved to a second buyer group, right? So we had a lot of LOIs. Took a month or two for that to shake out. But another buyer group, a local family, had a 1031. They were selling and they wanted to flip into this property. They gave us hard money, right? So hard money, earnest money would mean that day one, that they're gonna kind of say, I'm gonna buy this, right? And they're gonna give us money regardless of not whether this thing closes. There was one caveat on making sure the title was clear. There was one issue we had to do with the title. We bought the 12th unit. The owner had signed a piece of paper that had the wrong name of the condo association, right? So he had to re-sign the paper. We got that literally done within one day of them asking. Got it turned back around, mailed back to us, put in. And so we had cleaned everything we needed to do to get the hard money, but they had a change in their family situation. The 1031 included a mother and a daughter. The mother was deemed incompetent to make any more decisions. And the brother, who had to help and sign things off, decided to blow the whole deal up. And in that process, they just decided to walk, right? They expected to get their hard money back. We said, well, that's hard money. So that you shouldn't have to give that back to you, right? That's why we went with you. And so we have actually been in a fight over that since that time. And so still kind of waiting to see what the final will be there. We had our attorneys look at it, expected to take a lawsuit. We've offered settlements with them so far. There hasn't been any kind of push there, but we'll get it worked out. At the end of the day, it's not a huge amount of money, but we didn't think it was really fair for them to write a contract with hard money, us do all of our parts, them choose to walk away, and then expect to get their money back. That's not how the process is supposed to work. So a little bit of a touch and go situation there. Getting frustrated at this point now because we have lots of LOIs. Had two groups under contract. At this point now, we started in April. We're starting to push into October, November, and I finally was just done, right? So I called the broker and said, listen, your 6-month brokerage is up in November. If this thing can't close by the end of December, we're just done. We're going to refi, just hold on to it. The thing's making a ton of money. It's doing great. Why mess with it, right? To his credit, he was able to get another buyer to come in very quickly to fill it. Same price point, right? Everybody tried to beat us up on price. I'm not going to sell. Still are. So we were able to sell it to her at the end of 2021. We had some drama there because she decided she wanted to buy that 13th unit. She didn't want to deal with Leroy anymore. And unfortunately, he kind of took her over the barrel and got way too much money for his unit, but it was worth it just for her to get him out of the property. All in all, we ended up selling it for $1.25 million, which for 12 units, right, gave us over $100,000 per unit. That's even more important because we ended up buying another 55 units on the same road, right, similar type vintage. So we basically were able to sell our own comp for a property that we bought in October. So we bought 55 in October at $86,000 a door. We sold these for over over $100,000 a door. And so we feel like we've actually increased the value of the other property we bought because we sold this one and stuck to our guns. Total return over the just under 5 years would be 93%, just under 20% ROI, about a 25% IRR. Everything's said and done. That might be a little bit higher. We have to pay taxes, state taxes in the state of Alabama. So we'll get that cleaned up with the final numbers here shortly. Let's look at a couple pictures here so you kind of see what we're looking at. So this, oops.
Jeremy, we cannot see your screen.
Yeah. See it now? So here is Government House. Pretty lush. Again, great area. Across the street when we first bought it was a recycling plant. That shut down and eventually became a really nice kind of higher end nursery. It never hurts when your market gets better. So that definitely definitely helped us. Cleaner older buildings, we had repainted, re-roofed the whole thing. Now, due to the amount of water and just all the trees, which we had done multiple tree work multiple times, we did start to get where we needed to repaint again, probably right at the end, but didn't end up having to do that. But you can kind of see. So this is one of the Airbnbs. So you can kind of see this is a 2-bedroom unit. Pretty clean, Class B, B+. A little bit of historic charm, but all kind of the modern conveniences, kitchen that looks pretty Home Depot-ish. A lot of these cabinet choices were in there before we had done it. So we didn't really kind of make any changes if they already had the basic stuff there. So maybe not what I would choose, but, very functional. And then the cool part here is they all had these kind of outdoor areas that we made into little laundry rooms, kind of patios that we had been glassed in before our ownership. And we wanted to make some changes here, but because this was a conservation area in Mobile, we actually couldn't change anything to the exterior. So we chose not to go too in depth to try to make changes, and just kind of kept these as kind of outdoor little spaces, just little sunrooms. So that was kind of what we did there. Let's see here. Let's look at the original business plan. Where'd it go? First off, Alex, give me a couple of questions. There's a lot of information.
Yep. I was curious, what was your experience level when you came into the deal? I mean, 12 units, 13 units, but it's not your first. What was your confidence level and experience before going in?
It wasn't high, right? People know Bob and myself now as Climb Capital, right? We're a little bit bigger than just Bob and Jeremy. We bought our first syndication deal together with other people's money. Was the deal directly in front of us, right? So just a few months before. So that deal had started off, we thought, relatively well when we made the offer. Ended up having its own issues that we had to turn around. But I can't say that we necessarily felt like we had all the answers, but we definitely thought that because we knew a couple things, that we'd be a little bit better, right? So confidence level, I'd say, we knew we had a good deal. We knew we had a good product, but the process of actually running it was still a little bit up in the air. We were still both active duty at the time, and recognized that we were going to need a strong manager. We were going to need a strong general contractor. And, unfortunately, it was a lot bigger struggle to find those, but we at least knew that. So we were constantly looking to improve or upgrade that entire time.
So it's a B-class property, or kind of on its way to being a B-class property, but it's only 12 units. I know you buy a lot bigger now. Did that, in retrospect, was that a good move, buying something small, but, a higher class property, or do you prefer to go higher scale? I mean, did it really pay off, or was it just like, hey, that's a good deal and you moved on it?
Yeah. So, Bob and I really kind of started with this idea that we were going to buy rough properties and rough areas, clean them up, turn them around, sell them off to a much higher bidder. With the idea being, my first investments were in 2007, early 2008, right? Stock market. Lost a whole bunch of money as a 22-year-old, all loaned money, right? It was terrible, right? So, I go into investing in real estate with the idea that things have been on a tear now for 10-ish plus years since the 08 crash. I'm looking for the downside, right? So we were deciding that we wanted to buy kind of deep value deals that even if the market came down, we had bought the deal with so much value, even the market came down, we still had room to grow, right? In the value of the property itself. That was the idea, right? The execution of that was a lot harder than we thought it would be sometimes. And so the nice part about buying this deal, though smaller, we found that in the nicer deals, sometimes they're a lot easier to run, right? Your tenants are a little bit easier to deal with. It's a little bit more consistent day to day. There's a lot less random calls. And so I do think if I had to do it, I would prefer a larger property, right? Same amount of work goes into 12 units as it does to 120 units from my perspective. But a nicer clientele and a nicer property and a nicer area was nice for two things. One, because of the property itself and just it was easier to run. But two, it's a lot nicer to show people nice stuff than it is to show them the stuff that's in the middle of a turnaround.
Well, and you bought B class since then. So you obviously, and I'm with you. I bought, I learned buying C class properties that there's no such thing as a D class.
C minus.
Yeah, C minus, right. So I understand the love for B class properties, but you had a problem with property management, one that I've also felt. And I think I know how you solved that, but I'd like to hear you tell the story. How did you solve that? You kind of solved that problem permanently.
Right. So, I mean, we described that we are now managing all of our own deals at Climb Capital because we fired every other property management company in the area. If you are buying commercial real estate, you're buying nice stuff and big stuff. There's typically a lot of people that want to take those on. If you're buying smaller stuff or stuff that needs a little bit of work, it's a lot more effort for the property management companies. And a lot of the good ones just say no. So what you get are the property management companies that will say yes, which often are not the ones you really want. The other thing that we found with property management companies is not necessarily that they were bad, but they're highly dependent on a single person for success. And so, for example, when we moved to the second property management, we had a guy that we were working with, and he was the guy for us, right? Well, he got another better job and ended up leaving the company. Almost immediately upon him leaving, we got no service, right? Because he was the service. They weren't able to backfill that position. With the fourth property management company, right? When we first got started, we had direct access to the vice president. Things were good. When he turned his focus from Southern Alabama to Northern Alabama and left us, it just fell apart quickly, right? There was nobody kind of manning the show. So what we found is if you really want to take care of your own deals and make sure that somebody's really paying attention to it, especially on these deals that need some work, we need to do it ourselves. And we can find really good people who do the work, keep them motivated. If they're not motivated, we can move on from them much faster than if we're in a management contract that we can't get out of for a year at a time.
So then the question becomes, is it harder to manage a property management company that you own or a bunch of, well, obviously the answer is you obviously prefer it, but so tell me some of the new challenges that come with, okay, you have it in-house, but now we have to manage it in-house.
Right. So, one of the benefits of having it in-house is I get to choose the employees, right? So we go out and hire, we monitor, we maintain, so on and forth. The employees, we do their professional development, so on and so forth. There's some upside to that, right? I get to choose the people I really want, right? The downside is I have to do all those other things, right? I have to manage a business, not just manage a property, right? So it's definitely more hands-on. It's definitely more like running a business when you have to start thinking about the marketing aspects. You have to start thinking about all of the compliance factors, right? When you buy a property, going to get your business licenses, making sure you're set up with the housing authorities. All those things they take more brain power and more time and effort when you're running the company than when you just give it to another company who already has those relationships, already can do that for you. The difference, though, is though I'm doing more work for those specific things, I'm also getting a much higher level and more directed service, right, on my property. So I'm matching the right person to the right property. So I'm not hiring the lady who's going to yell at you, right, when you try to come to my B-class property. I'm hiring a lady that looks just like you, right, is going to want to sell you on this, right, for each property. And it's not a perfect case. If I was buying 150 to 200 unit, Class B properties in Mass, I'd probably just get a third-party management. They can do just as good a job as I can, maybe even better. In fact, I know they can do a better job. But if I'm going to be buying sub 100 units, or I'm going to be buying C-class properties that need some turnaround, putting my boots on and going to work, and knocking on doors myself is going to be much better, I've found.
Gotcha. You have been pretty, I've learned a lot about how you operate in terms of following a business plan. And so this deal went 53 months, something in there. What was the original business plan? What was the exit dollar? And did you hit that? And if you hit it early, is that like, what was the condition that made you decide now's the time to sell?
Well, so again, right, we were a little bit naive and maybe kind of what we knew and what we didn't know. We got started on this deal. We knew we had a great deal. We knew we could make money on it. We thought that with the right people, the work would be kind of done outside of us. And of course, we had to find over and over again that we had to be much more injected into the process than we otherwise had thought. So you see down here on our property highlights, our original plan was about an 8.1% cash on cash year-over-year return. We never got to that point, never got close to that. And our 5-year total return we thought was 135%. We didn't hit that, right? But we got to about a 4.5-year point, and we made about a 93% return for our investors. I don't think most people are going to be too upset about nearly 20% annualized return, but we didn't hit the business plan. If we kind of go through this, the business plan was completely dependent on us being able to hit our original CapEx budget of $250,000. Well, when your CapEx budget moves to $200,000 because you have to fix these problems when you find them, that kind of kills the plan here quite a bit. The other thing that we found is that, we're trying to do a budget here. At the time, we were working with a property management company. So we were leaning on them to do the market assessments on what can we rent these units for. And they were telling us that these are $1,100 to $1,200 units. So renting them at $1,100 should not be a problem at all. Right? We never hit $1,200, and we were only hitting $1,100 by the fourth year. Right. So when we first got started, we were not filling these units up at the initial rents we were expecting. We were really about $200 a month lower. So when you combine overspending on the construction, under renovate, or revenue not hitting the original expectations, that starts to hurt a little bit, right? And so this is definitely a deal in which we were able to get the deal into a good position. I think if we had held it for a long term, cash flow was ready to start being paid out this last year, no problem at all. We chose not to pay it out because we knew we were going to sell it. But we easily could have, had this deal be an 8 to 10% cash on cash going forward. But we decided, basically, because we hadn't hit these original projections, that it was probably a better plan to go ahead and sell, get our investors their money back. Let's go find something else. The other thing I'd say too that has happened, I think all of us have seen in our own personal lives, is the cost since 2017 for a lot of things has gone up significantly higher than we originally expected. So things like taxes, insurance, just general repairs, all those things that were a little bit more manageable, 5 years ago, we're just seeing the pricing go way, way up when it comes to both employee labor costs and actual material costs. And so as your expenses are going up much higher than your expected expenses are, it's tough to kind of keep your delta that you're looking for between your income and your expenses. Totally overcomable if you can raise your rents fast enough and high enough, but that's a lot harder to actually do than it is to say to do, unless throw everybody out. So original plans here, we're getting up to that 10% cash on cash. We never really hit that. Original purchase price was the 357. Wanted to do 250 in capex. Our loan ended up being a little bit higher than the 394, so it needed about that 212 as we went. And so, this position, we were thinking we were going to sell it at a 9 cap. We ended up selling this thing at a 6 cap. That helps, right? When your market gets better, that definitely helps. Some people can think that we just got bailed out by the market. You can think that way, but I'd also say if you don't ever play, you never hit any home runs. You can never let the market help you. And so I think just by jumping in, knowing that we had a good deal here and then being conservative in that underwriting, we were able to beat the sales price here significantly better.
What year did you get that 4.5% loan? That's pretty good.
The 4.5% loan was in 2017.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Was that a local relationship?
Yep. So it's a bank that we had used before. Now the downside, right, is they were a month late, right, getting the loan closed.
Sure.
But that is a local bank that we have since used multiple times. So a great relationship with. We went to that to refinance. The refinance was basically just a copy of the current loan with the same term, and basically just kind of bolted on the refinance of the original loan. So they had the same timelines.
Okay. So we're going to open this up to Q&A here in a minute. But before that, I want to ask you, and you've talked about a lot of things you learned, a lot of mistakes. If you could give me like a 4-minute, 1 or 2 point big summary of like, okay, these are the 2 things that I took into the immediately next deal. Like, don't do this. Could you hit me that? And then in about 4 or 5 minutes, if anybody has Q&A, you can start pumping them into the chat now, or if you want to wait and do it audio, we can do that as soon as Jeremy's done.
So I would say the answer to that is a couple of things. One would be something we already knew going into this deal, right? Construction matters. And you got to have somebody that can manage the process, manage the budget, and do it right. So, I think making sure that you have a quality and somebody that's already tested, having people learn on your dollar is typically not the best deal. And unfortunately, in this deal, that's definitely what happened with our first run now. I don't think anybody meant to make, some of the overspending and kind of the underperforming, but that's definitely kind of what happened with the original construction loan. So that definitely, you got to have a better plan. If you're going to be fixing things, you got to have more money in the bank than you really need. You got to know exactly where that money's going to go kind of before you close. And so we had that. Unfortunately, we just didn't hit any of it. If we'd had maybe a little bit more experienced operator there, that would have certainly helped. Second is management matters. You got to have a manager who's aligned with what you're trying to do. They've got to be aggressive when you want to be aggressive. They got to be able to communicate with you, communicate with the tenants correctly. And so one of the things I think we could have done better here is moved faster to moving away from the problems. When the problems seem like a problem, it's a problem, right? Waiting 3 or 4 more months doesn't make the problem go away. It's what we typically find. So, recently I heard you've never fired anybody too fast, right? And so when we knew that these things weren't working, we probably should have just said, hey, it's time to move on a little bit quicker. And I think because we knew we'd had success with our own manager in 2018, we probably should have just rode that same horse, right? We shouldn't have moved off from him. The original plan was to move off from him so that we could get more help with the condominium association. Well, the new management company never helped with the condominium association. Made a bunch of promises and never followed through. So, ride the hot horse when you can, right? As you go. And then the last one here it says, this deal from a business plan perspective did not go as planned. No way, shape, or form, right? But if you stay in long enough, if you have some grit, if you just hold on, real estate will solve its problems most of the time. Right? So we're very thankful that we had some great investors who kind of still believed in us and kind of waited the process out. I think they were all very happy at the end. They all kind of during the process realized, hey, it was a process and success is not a straight line. So it doesn't just go straight up every day. It's bumpy, right? So we had some down days, we had some up days. But overall, right, we stuck to the plan, just continued operating. Got it to where we were able to make a successful exit for us. And quite honestly, I think we really turned that property around to be a real boon for the area, tenants and the new owner.
Love that. Real estate can be very forgiving, thankfully. Mm-hmm. Anybody have any questions? I'd also be curious if where everybody found us, if you found this chat from Facebook, LinkedIn, or our email campaigns. We are going to post this on YouTube, although you probably won't need to rewatch it.
Hey, so it's not really a question, Jeremy. It's more of I can turn on my video, but you're not going to see anything you want to see. So, but you kind of already answered it, and that is that you went into this, with your expectation was much lower than the way it came out, and some of that, was beyond your control because the markets, did get better. And I heard you even kind of talk about that you've heard, or at least felt like there's criticism in that regard. But what I heard a lot from your description of the entire process was that as you reached a new hurdle and reached a new obstacle between you and Bob and whoever else was involved, and quite honestly, I vaguely remember because at this time, you were talking very loosely about, or not very loosely about this. You guys were keeping this stuff very close to your chest. I do remember you talking a little bit about some of these challenges, and the fact is that you and Bob kind of realized there was a challenge between management, between the flood and some of the other stuff. And by the way, who puts a water heater in the freaking attic? I don't understand that myself. But hey, if it works out for insurance purposes, but but my point is, I guess, because in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, so I've known you guys for a while, so like this doesn't occur to me. Except now I'm thinking, okay, how do I, if I'm an investor and I'm looking to park money with Climb Capital for a couple of years, I look at this, I'm like, well, it's almost like they kind of lucked into it as far as the level of success, except that you readily admit the challenges as you met them, and then you pressed on through the challenges to overcome it, rather than letting the circumstances overcome the two of you guys. And then I realize it's more than two of you now, but rather than letting the circumstances overcome you guys. And so and I realize that's not really a question as much as I guess really just sort of I don't know. It's just something I heard through your talk. Like you kind of answered my question as I was thinking, hey, why would a guy invest with you guys? And the answer is because even if you see the unforeseen challenges, you still rise, you still figure out a way to overcome the obstacles.
Yeah. So the one thing I would say too, that, success isn't a straight line for anybody, right? Like in business, nothing ever seems to work, right? A pro forma is a guess. So, I think we get a lot of times, some people get frustrated that, our plan isn't going exactly as executed. Well, when I'm buying broken properties and I'm turning them around, just like, broken people or anything else that's broken, it doesn't always like neatly go back together exactly like you wanted to. So, for example, on this one, we ended up tearing up some of the slabs to go into bad plumbing. well, we'd all the plumbing checked when we closed on the deal, right? Like nothing had failed. But what we found is that because nobody was in it at the time, we didn't know that some of the pipes weren't big enough. When you start putting people in there, well, your old building and your old pipes are no longer working, right? So recognizing that you're going to find, I guess, problems, and then being ready to just take those on. The other thing on this deal too that I didn't talk about is there was a time where I just wrote checks out of my own pocket. I think one thing is at Climb Capital, we stick to these deals. We believe in these deals. These are our deals, whether we're recourse or non-recourse, whether we have a lot of money in our little money. This is my name, right? So I wrote some checks, at 0% interest rate to be able to get this deal to the point where we could get to the refinance. I don't like doing that. It's not something I'm real proud of, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So I do think it's important. It's one of the reasons I like doing these little deal debriefs. We look super successful if you just read the headlines. I think understanding kind of when you look underneath that some of these things are hard. So we've had to learn to kind of accept that, kind of just solve the problems as they come and try to enjoy the process as much as we can as we're doing it. Oh, and by the way, we've done it enough times now that even if it seems like it really sucks, we believe that it's doable. When you fix enough problems, you realize problems can be fixed. It just takes a little bit of time. So we'll see that again, I'm sure, in the future.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's the thing, really, is that as you do see the problems and you get stronger because from the experience, and the experience says really you're going to, basically you're going to be able to see, you're going to be able to anticipate some of the problems. You can't anticipate everything, but like you said, if you're reaching into your own pocket to cover the deal so the investors are happy, I mean, you can't really ask a whole lot more than that. Ideally, that's not going to happen as much in the future, or rather, even if it does, your pocket may be a little bit deeper now. But whatever. It's ideally, it's not going to happen as much because you've done a better job of because you can anticipate some of this stuff. Just straight from experience.
Well, I think experience has definitely been built. Track record's been built. Money's been made. I think some of these early deals we were really thin on some of our expectations and some of our reserves. And after having a couple of deals that had too thin of reserves, and we had to dip in my pocket a couple of times. I don't really want thin reserves, right? So we're no longer learning on my dollar. Our investors aren't learning on my dollar anymore, and I'm not learning on my dollar anymore. So we're getting a little bit better, making sure that we have fatter reserves and solve these problems before they become problems. Yeah, good comment there. Thank you.
Everybody has to ride the macroeconomic wave of real estate. If it's up, you play. And when it's down, you play. Okay. Any other questions? Jeremy?
Listen to the YouTubers who may be seeing this in the months or years going forward, right? If you have more questions, be glad to answer them. Please reach out to me or Alex or Bob. Try to be transparent. So if there's something we can answer, let's do it. There's no secrets in this business. It's just hard work. So we can help somebody else get started. I'd like to do that too.
Love it. Everybody, make sure you follow Jeremy on TikTok. I'm never going to stop saying it. I love it. It's my favorite thing. We will post another one of these. Probably, I think we're going to take a break next week. Probably, but we're going to do more of these deal debriefs. So stay tuned for the Zoom links. We appreciate everybody coming out. Jeremy, thank you very much.
You guys for listening, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, guys.